Hello everyone and welcome, my name is Thundernumel and I welcome you to the channel. In this video I'd like to talk to you about some of the most common mistakes that DDD players make. DDD is a very complex deck and you can't really fault the player for unintentionally misinterpreting an effect or something. But do keep in mind that if you're going to a tournament and playing as a DDD player or playing against a DDD player, you should know what every card does. So without further ado, let's get into the list. First of all, we have Big Gengas. Things to keep note of with this card is that its revive effect triggers on normal summon and on special summon, unlike the small Gengas. And the more important part is that its quick effect, negation, is once per your turn and it can't be activated on your opponent's turn. Now as a DDD player, if your opponent asks you what Big Gengas does, you can just tell them to read the effect for themselves, and 9 out of 10 times they will miss the fact that it can only be activated on your turn. But that's super scummy, and for you non-DDD players, you should read the card more carefully. Next up is DD Orthos. First thing to note of with this card is that its scale effect is once per copy, so basically are not hard once per turn. The other and the more important part of the card is that if it's special summoned, you're locked into Fiend type monsters. And since it's written in a particular way, you may not realize that this effect applies whenever it's special summoned and not only when it's special summoned by its own effect. Why this would matter in a game is that most people nowadays run Baron de Fleur. People usually make Baron de Fleur before they go into their big plays to play around hand traps. And you should keep in mind that unless Orthos is normal summoned, you cannot go into Baroness de Fleur. Its effect to summon itself is a trigger effect when you take battle or effect damage. That means that when your opponent attacks you and you take battle damage, you can special summon it as a pseudo Gorz and maybe it can save your game, who knows. Next up on our list is Ragnarok. What's important to take note of here is that its scale effect revives a DD, but your opponent takes half damage for the rest of the turn. I see people often forgetting about this part of the effect. DDD players might just opt not to tell anything about it to their opponent, and the opponent might just concede because they think they may have lost the game due to the overwhelming presence on the field. And even though DDD card texts are extremely long, you should keep in mind that they have important drawbacks. There's another important thing to say about Ragnarok. Its monster effect to revive a DDD monster from their graveyard is exclusive to DDDs and cannot revive DDs, because DDs are DDDs, but DDDs are not DDs. And while we're still talking about Ragnarok, keep in mind that its banish effect is once per copy. So you can tribute something, banish an opponent's monster, then link away the Ragnarok, pendulum summon it back and use the effect all over again. Oh, and before I forget this too, Ragnarok's scale effect cannot be used in damage step. This is relevant if you want to use the floating effect of Gilgamesh. Its effect to special summon from the extra deck activates in the damage step, meaning that on the summon of the whatever monster you choose to summon with the effect of Gilgamesh, you cannot activate Ragnarok. You can, however, activate the effect of small Gengas or big Gengas, special summoning back something else, and then on the special summon of whatever you special summoned, you can activate Ragnarok's scale effect. You know what else will help you winning more Yu-Gi-Oh games? Subscribing to the Thundernumel channel. Click the subscribe and the notification button, and you will immediately become 10 times better at this children's card game. But seriously though, it doesn't cost you nothing and it really means a lot to me, so please, moving on. Also of note is talking about DD Thomas. Even though it's mostly used as a scale, sometimes you can special summon it, then use its effect to pop a scale and special summon a level 8 from the deck. If you do that, however, your opponent is taking half the battle damage for the rest of the turn. And while we're talking about level 8 DDs, let's talk about DDD Duodon King Kali Yuga. You should always remember that it negates every card on the field for the rest of the turn, but that's not exclusive to your opponent. That means that if you make it on your own turn, your cards will be negated, meaning that from the second you activate Kali Yuga, you are only allowed to activate the effects of cards in your hand or in your graveyard, lest they be negated, of course. Next up on our list is DDD Cursed King Siegfried. If this card is destroyed by battle or a card effect and sent to the graveyard, you have to gain 1000 life points for each dark contract you control. Now this is of course incredibly useful so you don't die to your own dark contracts, but if you forget about that effect for just a second when it's destroyed and then you want to rewind back to gain the life points, your opponent can just say no smiley face, because the effect is mandatory. Also, while we're talking about Siegfried, let me give you a bonus tip. If you for some reason did not use its effect to negate your opponent's spell trap card on their turn, and you still have a contract laying around on the field, you can use Siegfried's effect to negate your own contract during the opponent's turn. And because Siegfried negates the effect until the next standby phase, in the standby phase the contract that you negated will activate to burn you, but it will resolve without effect. Proceeding into the main phase, the contract will no longer be negated and you will be able to use its effect. Moreover, if you have 2 dark contracts and you only want to use the effect of one of those, and you don't want any of them to burn you, you can negate one with the Siegfried on your opponent's turn and then negate the other one on your turn, thus not taking any damage. Oh, and before I forget, another way to save yourselves from getting burned by your spell effects is the Savant Copernicus. Most people usually forget that it has a pendulum effect. While this card is in the pendulum zone, you can negate an activated spell effect that would inflict damage to you, then destroy this card. Meaning that you can negate the burn damage for Dark Contract with the Gate and Dark Contract with the Swamp King. Next up, it's DDD Vice Typhon. People just assume that it's another copy of Necro Slime, and in most cases it is. However, in the grind game you have to realize that it has to be activated at the turn it is sent to the graveyard. You cannot have him lying in the graveyard for a few turns and then just go into big Gengas with him whenever you desire. You would have to either revive it and send it to the graveyard or just send another copy anyways. Now let's talk about the big boy Gilgamesh himself. Its floating effect is amazing, but I see people misplaying with this card a lot. First of all, to activate its floating effect, it has to be link summoned, not revived from the graveyard. Also, it has to be destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster. That means that you cannot just go into Gilgamesh and then crash it into some of your opponent's monster in order to proc its effect. And if it's destroyed by a card effect, it has to be in your monster zone. You can't give it to your opponent with, let's say, creature swap and then destroy it to use its effect. And I guess a side note, if it's destroyed you can special summon anything from your extra deck, not just the face-up pendulum monsters. As for the new DDD Deuce King Machinex, in order to attach your opponent's monster to it as materials, its effects have to be activated on the field and not in the hand or the graveyard. I still see some people trying to attach cards from the graveyard and the hand, and it's kinda bugs me honestly. With the rise of popularity of the 2-card combos, I see more and more people scaling Griffin and Thomas, then destroying Griffin in order to boost a monster and then picking it back with the Thomas, thus special summoning it from the hand. Do keep in mind that Griffin's scale effect cannot be activated unless you have at least one Dark Contract in the graveyard. So before planning to use Griffin's effect, check if you have a Dark Contract in the graveyard, and if not, send one there. Next up is High King Gengas that has a very specific wording in its text. When a spell trap card or a monster's effect is activated that includes an effect to special summon a monster, quick effect and yada yada yada. Important part of the text that we are taking a look at here is that a spell trap card has to be activated in order for High Caesar to negate it. This means that High Caesar can negate, let's say, a Shadow Fusion, but it cannot negate an already activated Swamp King. And let's close this discussion with Go DDD Divine Zero King Rage. I have seen a few people do this and I'm just letting you know that you can't. Its skill effect reads that if you normal summon a level 5 or higher DD monster, you can do it without tributing. But the important part is you cannot set the monster without tributing, since it being a DD is required public knowledge. And that's it for the discussion, guys. I hope this video helps you play better with or against DDDs. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel because we're so close to 500 subscribers. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!